Hi, I'm Kelly Monaco. I'm currently unemployed, so I created this channel to earn some extra income. I'll be updating you with the latest news about the Drama General Hospital.
Hello and welcome back. We're looking at the issue of Jordan being in danger and the story Valentine is making regarding the adjustment of his sinister plan. What Valentine did on that road should have looked like redemption. In the brutal aftermath of Jordan and Curtis's car crash, when twisted metal, shattered glass, and the smell of smoke turned the night into something almost apocalyptic, he was the one who moved first. He pulled them out of danger with the speed and focus of a man who understood exactly how little time remained before the wreck became a grave. For a brief moment, that single act should have made him the hero of the story. It should have washed away suspicion and forced everyone to see him as the man who chose life over calculation. But nothing around Valentine ever remains that simple for long. Even in the middle of rescue, his instincts were already moving towards something colder. Inside Jordan's damaged vehicle, hidden beneath the visible violence of the crash, he found a device that should never have been there unless someone had been tracking, monitoring, and carefully anticipating her movements. He did not hesitate. He took it before anyone else could notice. In that instant, the entire meaning of the accident changed. The crash stopped being only a near-fatal tragedy and became evidence of a much larger operation, one tied to Brennan, Sidwell, and the darker machinery surrounding Cullum. Valentine understood immediately that this was not random. Jordan and Curtis had not simply become victims of bad timing or cruel chance. They had been drawn into a design created by people who did not see human beings as lives, but as pressure points. Brennan represented the polished face of control, the kind of man who could bury violence beneath strategy and make manipulation sound like necessity. Sidwell embodied something raw and more dangerous, a thirst for revenge so consuming that it no longer cared who was destroyed in the process. Cullum stood between them like the ugliest proof of what happens when intellect and brutality begin serving the same purpose. The device from Jordan's car told Valentine that the crash was not an isolated event. It was part of a wider system of surveillance, pressure, and planned impact. Someone wanted access to Jordan, or wanted to remove her, or wanted the fallout from her suffering to trigger reactions in everyone connected to her. Curtis was not just beside her at the wrong time. He had become part of the same target zone, collateral in a game designed by men who thought they were untouchable. That discovery should have sent Valentine straight toward the truth in the open. It should have pushed him to hand the device over, force an investigation, and expose Brennan before more damage could be done. But Valentine has never been a man who trusts open systems to protect the people he loves. His entire life has taught him that truth, once released, can be twisted, stalled, diluted, or weaponized by the wrong hands. So instead of sharing what he found, he kept it. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he needed time to understand what the device contained before Brennan buried the trail or Sidwell launched another strike. He told himself secrecy was the only practical form of protection. Yet beneath those justifications lay something more dangerous than caution. The moment he slipped that device into his possession, he crossed a line. He stopped being a witness to the conspiracy and became an active force inside it. He was no longer merely reacting to the danger. He was choosing how the danger would be shaped from this point on. For Jordan, the pain of survival was sharpened by instinct. Even before her body fully recovered, she could feel that something about the crash was wrong in a deeper way than anyone wanted to admit. It was not just the violence of the impact. It was the pattern around it, the timing, the unease in the aftermath, the subtle sense that the official version of events was too smooth to be true. Jordan has lived too long among half-truths and hidden motives to mistake orchestration for coincidence. Somewhere inside her, suspicion settled quickly. Valentine had taken something from that car. She may not have seen it clearly in the moment, but she felt the absence of honesty afterward. And that absence began to matter more than gratitude. She knew he had saved her life, but she also knew that men like Valentine rarely save anyone without also carrying away a secret. Her need to uncover what he knew became more than professional curiosity. It became personal survival. She refused to let her near-death experience become a private turning point in someone else's secret war. Curtis felt the betrayal differently, but no less deeply. Physical pain was easier to endure than uncertainty. Wounds could be treated. Broken trust could not. The longer he replayed the crash in his mind, the more furious he became at the possibility that he and Jordan had been used as pieces in a larger strategy. He hated the idea that his survival might carry a debt to a man who was also hiding the truth. Gratitude toward Valentine became tangled with resentment because every unanswered question made the rescue feel less like mercy and more like the first step in another manipulation. Curtis could sense that something had shifted in Port Charles. The crash was not the whole story. It was the visible rupture created by a hidden hand, and now everyone close to it was being pulled into a deeper darkness. That realization fed his anger until it became something heavier than outrage. It became resolve. He would not be protected through silence. He would not be handled. If someone had tried to destroy Jordan and nearly destroy him in the process, then the truth had to come out, no matter who it exposed. But Valentine was already moving faster than either of them knew. Once he began analyzing the device, a chilling structure emerged piece by piece. It was more than a tracker. It was part of a wider surveillance design, something intended not only to follow movement, but to predict it, exploit it, and turn it into leverage. Jordan had been mapped long before the crash. Her routines, her vulnerabilities, her intersections with other people had been noted. That meant the accident was not simply an attempt to cause harm. It may have been meant to trigger a chain reaction. If Jordan died, one set of consequences would follow. If she survived, another set would begin. Either outcome served someone's strategy. That was the moment Valentine understood how wide the danger had become. This was no longer just about Jordan, Curtis, Brennan, or Sidwell. It was about everyone emotionally connected to the fallout. It was about fear spreading through relationships, families, and loyalties until the entire city became easier to control. Then came the thought that changed Valentine completely. Charlotte and Danny. Once their names entered his mind as possible future leverage, everything hardened inside him. Charlotte was not simply his daughter in that moment. She was the one living part of his heart he could not survive losing. Danny, too, stood close enough to the blast zone to become vulnerable, whether as witness, pawn, or collateral damage. The possibility that Brennan and Sidwell's conflict could eventually touch them pushed Valentine beyond caution and into obsession. Men like him do not respond to fear by becoming softer. They respond by becoming more strategic, more secretive, and more willing to justify darkness as protection. He did not want to wait for proof to become public. He did not want to trust institutions that might move too slowly. He wanted to strike first, destabilize the people behind the crash, and make sure the danger never reached the children. In his mind, that was not villainy, it was necessity. But necessity has always been the most seductive excuse in Port Charles. That is where Valentine became truly dangerous. He was no longer just holding evidence, he was building a private campaign. He watched Brennan for signs of panic, listened for shifts in Sidwell's behavior, and began quietly testing the fault lines between them. Brennan still wore the face of a man in control, but control is easiest to maintain when every threat is visible. The moment uncertainty entered the game, cracks began to form. Sidwell, by contrast, became more volatile. A man driven by revenge cannot tolerate the feeling that someone else may be moving against him in secret. Valentine recognized that instability and saw a possible opening. If he played his cards carefully, he could force Brennan and Sidwell into paranoia, set them against each other, and weaken the structure that had nearly killed Jordan and Curtis. But strategies like that never stay clean. To break dangerous men, he would have to manipulate the people around them, feed selective truths into the right places, and risk igniting chaos before anyone else was ready for it. Meanwhile, Jordan and Curtis were moving toward the truth from the other side. Jordan's suspicion sharpened into determination. Curtis's anger hardened into something relentless. Both of them could feel that Valentine was no longer simply a rescuer caught in the aftermath of violence. He was part of the next stage of it. The more they pushed, the more pressure built on every side. Brennan began sensing movement he could not identify. Sidwell's temper became more unstable. Old alliances felt brittle. Ordinary conversations carried hidden weight. Even Charlotte, without knowing the details, could feel the emotional weather around Valentine darkening. He watched too closely, answered too carefully, and carried the quiet tension of a man already planning for disaster. Children often sense danger before adults admit it exists, and Charlotte was no exception. Danny, too, was drifting too close to events far uglier than he could understand, his very innocence making him more vulnerable to a conflict designed by ruthless adults. What makes the story so tragic is that Valentine may truly believe he is doing the right thing. He is not plotting out of simple malice. He is acting from terror, love, and the unbearable conviction that if he does not control what happens next, the people he cares about will pay the price. But fear in a man like Valentine never stays pure. It becomes calculation. It becomes secrecy. It becomes the quiet belief that one more lie is justified if it prevents a greater loss. That is how he begins to resemble the very forces he claims to be fighting. Brennan hides behind order. Sidwell hides behind vengeance. Valentine hides behind love. Yet hidden motives can still destroy lives, no matter how sincere they feel in private. The danger now is not only the conspiracy he uncovered, the greater danger is what that conspiracy is pulling out of him. So the crash did not end with Jordan and Curtis surviving. That was only the beginning. The real aftermath lies in what Valentine removed from the wreckage and what he chose to do with it. He uncovered proof that Brennan, Sidwell, and Cullum were connected to something far more calculated than random violence. He realized Charlotte and Danny could eventually be caught in the crossfire. And instead of stepping into the light, he moved deeper into shadow, convinced that only he can stop what is coming. Jordan is too perceptive not to keep digging. Curtis is too angry to stay quiet. Brennan is too intelligent not to sense the trap closing around him. Sidwell is too unstable not to lash out when pressure mounts, and Valentine, standing at the center of all of it, is no longer simply reacting to danger. He is shaping the next shock himself. In Port Charles, that is when fear becomes fate. That is when a man who once looked like a savior can become the most unpredictable threat of all, not because he stopped caring, but because caring too much has finally pushed him into the darkest version of his own instincts.
I'll be back at the General Hospital soon. We'll see each other again soon. Thank you for supporting my channel. Goodbye and see you again.